It turned out that Wang happened to know a professor at the Beijing Institute of Archaeology. They often interacted. Recently, something happened, and the specific situation is as follows. Archaeological activities and cultural heritage protection were forced to halt for 10 years during the Cultural Revolution. After the reform and opening up, they resumed. The past 3 years have been the peak period for archaeology, with a large number of ancient tombs and relics appearing consecutively. Transactions and exchanges in the antique collecting community were also extremely lively. Large and small tomb raiding groups also got wind of things. Whenever they saw a mound, they would start digging, especially in the regions of Xianxia, Henan, and Hunan, and the activity grew more intense. Since the discovery of the tomb complex on the banks of the Shaohe River, Lulin, in Xinjiang, people seem to have suddenly awakened. In the Xinjiang desert, the once glorious Silk Road, 36 kingdoms of the western regions along the Peacock River, Hu Lulin, Milan, Nia, Luntaipule, Gumo, Xie, these paradises for adventurers, how much wealth and splendor had been buried under the vast, boundless golden sands. For a time, countless expedition teams, archaeological teams, and even tomb raiding groups vied to enter the Taklamakan Desert in search of treasures. This was the second major desert exploration fever, following the one at the beginning of the 19th century, but for the vast majority of inexperienced, fledgling explorers, this immense desert was, as Folke Bergman, the great Swedish explorer, wrote of it, a place where one only goes in but never comes back. Tu Vong Kai Hai, Sea of Death, this name also originated from that. The protection of ancient tomb sites in Xinjiang was extremely urgent, but the state lacked sufficient manpower and resources to excavate and protect sites in the Taklamakan Desert. Most archaeological staff were concentrated in Henan, rushing to excavate ancient tombs that had been robbed or damaged during the construction of other projects. The professor whom Wang knew had studied Western regions culture for a long time. He was extremely worried about the destruction of ancient Xinjiang tombs and persistently petitioned leaders, hoping to lead a team into the desert himself to conduct a field survey, assess the sites, and then request relevant agencies to excavate or protect them. Superiors cited insufficient funds, making excuses again and again. In reality, funding was secondary. The main reason was that too many people had recently encountered trouble in the desert, and they were worried that the professors might face misfortune. In officialdom, there was an unwritten rule: don't seek merit, only wish to be innocent. Not making mistakes was a great achievement, and promotion was only a matter of time. Only recently, a Chinese American appeared and sponsored all the expenses for the professor's archaeological team, and only then was the team formed. Currently, this archaeological expedition team is still in the initial preparation phase. They need to find an experienced desert survival guide, and they also lack someone skilled in geomancy and astrology, because most of the archaeological team are bookworms. Without a guide and an expert in geomancy and astrology, they would not be able to find the locations of ancient tombs or relics. Finding such a person was not easy. Some people came to apply, but more than half were frauds. Their true colors were revealed as soon as they spoke, so the professor also asked Wang to help find such a person. Wang asked me if I wanted to participate. The American was paying a relatively high price, and at the same time, we could go into the desert to see if there were any large tombs, treating it as reconnaissance. This would provide valuable reference for future actions. I replied, "This is very good. For us, it can be considered a rare practical opportunity. We two brothers have never interacted with archaeologists before, and if we can go with them, we'll surely learn a lot of interesting things. I've been to the desert before. I once went deep into the desert twice for military exercises while in the army. I can be a guide, but to enter the desert, we still need to find a very skilled local guide. Furthermore, regarding the art of geomancy and astral observation, I'm confident. As long as there are stars in the sky, I can lead them to find what they need." However, I don't quite understand why that American is funding our Chinese expedition. What is their purpose? Americans are not lei feng. They are very pragmatic and value practical benefits the most. They won't do anything unprofitable. Wang replied, "I don't know the exact situation very well, only roughly. The American who provided the funding is a woman of Chinese descent. Her father is a billionaire on Wall Street and has always been very fond of archaeological expedition activities. Last year, her father went on an expedition to Xinjiang with a group of Chinese explorers. It seems he was very interested in some Jingjue culture. That time they went to find the ancient city of Jingjue buried deep within the sea of sand, but they never returned, not a single person. The nearby army camp even mobilized planes to search, but in the end nothing was found, not a single clue. She inherited a huge fortune, and perhaps she's still unwilling to accept what happened to her father. This time, by providing funding, she probably wants to utilize her greatest capabilities to search for her loved one again. Although she is American, she is, after all, an overseas Chinese. According to Chinese tradition, when people die, they should be buried in their hometown. Drifting in the desert, exposed to the scorching sun and wind, and separated from one's loved ones. How could one rest in peace? The three of us drank until evening before disbanding. We arranged for Wang to contact the buyer for the 2 jade pieces and to introduce us to Professor Chen, who was organizing the archaeological team about to depart, to see if we could join, which would require a direct conversation with Professor Chen. 2 days later, Wang took us to Tianjin. On Shenyang Road, there was a small antique shop whose owner was a fair-skinned woman in her 30s, whom we all called Sister Han. Sister Han was the mistress of a big boss, one of a handful of antique collectors in Hong Kong. He opened a shop for Sister Han in Tianjin, first, so she would have something to do to make her life less boring, and second, to acquire ancient burial artifacts. Sister Han was a woman of few words, but her antique appraisal skills were extremely high. After examining our items, she generously paid 60,000 yuan. Currently, at most, it would only be 50,000. I'm paying you an extra 10,000 as a gesture of friendship. If you find anything good in the future, please bring it to me. I received the thick wad of money, my heart pounding, my hands trembling slightly. I silently cursed myself for being so pathetic. Oh ye, you've seen a thing or two in life. Back then, when Chairman Mao reviewed the Red Guards at Tiananmen, were you excited? Frankly, yes, I was excited then, but not like this. For better or worse, you've climbed trees in deep forests, dug tunnels in the Kunlun Mountains, participated in battles, so why are you so moved today that you can't even hold a few coins steadily? Oh, is this the power of money? There's no other way. You might not respect money, but without it, you can't run electricity for the villagers in the mountains, nor improve the lives of your fallen comrades' families. Money is too great. Going through life and death, for what? It's just for money. Upon returning, I divided the money into 4 parts. 1 for Anne Tu, 1 for Quan Fatso, 1 to give to the branch secretary to distribute to everyone, and the remaining part 1 kept for equipment and as funds for the next operation. Quan Fatso didn't want to accept his share. He said, "This amount of money, it's not small, but it's not much either. It's definitely not enough to repair the road for Gang Camp, and after dividing it, there won't be much left. I heard that many fallen soldiers from your company still have numerous family members back home, with large families. Although they receive state subsidies, their lives are still very difficult. Some mothers, whose sons sacrificed their lives, don't even have money to buy a train ticket to Yunnan to visit their sons' graves. Hearing you mention that, my eyes sting, and I feel uncomfortable inside. Just send all my share to the families of the fallen soldiers and wounded comrades. In my life, my greatest wish was to be a soldier and fight in battle, but my father died early and I didn't get that chance. Please help me fulfill this wish. Later, when we have a lot of money, it won't be too late to share it with me." Mentioning this, my eyes also welled up with tears, and I patted Quan Fatso's shoulder. "All right. You're becoming more enlightened every day. There will be many more opportunities to make money later. This time, let's take advantage of the trip to Xinjiang and make some money from the Americans first." After resting for 5 days, Wang sent word that he had arranged a meeting with Professor Chen. He then took Quan Fatso and me to the professor's workplace. The professor was elderly. Upon meeting him, I couldn't help but worry for him. This old man, did he really want to venture into the world's second largest shifting sand desert? Sitting with Professor Chen was his assistant, Hao Eguo, a middle-aged intellectual in his 40s, with hair as messy as a bird's nest. At first glance, it was clear he lacked social experience. His thick spectacles indicated that he was a serious and meticulous scholar, practical, passionate about research, and not overly concerned with his appearance. People like him were not uncommon during the Cultural Revolution, but after the reform and opening up, with new intellectual trends, movements, and values, such old-fashioned people became rare. Hao Eguo scrutinized us thoroughly without any pretense, and spoke directly. "Comrades, we know why you two are here. You must also be aware of our archaeological team's requirements. This time, it's an exception within an exception, an anomaly within an anomaly. We need talent. Do you two have experience in desert exploration and survival, or are you skilled in astral geomancy? This cannot be taken lightly. If you don't possess these abilities, don't even think about using backdoor connections." After saying this, he glanced at Wang, showing no respect for anyone. Professor Chen felt that Hao Eguo was too blunt. He was very close to Wang's father, often consulting both father and son on matters of antique appraisal and appreciation. Not wanting to create tension, he stood up from the sofa to mediate, invited us to sit down, and chatted for a few minutes, asking Quan Fatso and me some trivial questions. After listening, he smiled and nodded. "Not simple, huh? You've served as a Liberation Army Company commander, have combat experience, and have been to the desert. That's truly rare. You're certainly more than capable of leading our group of bookworms. Most relics and ancient tombs in the desert are buried under the vast golden sands. The Peacock River of old has long since dried up, making them difficult to find. If one isn't proficient in celestial geomancy, it would be hard to locate them. Are you two knowledgeable about this type of geomancy?" I knew that celestial geomancy was also called heaven, piercing blue bag art, which was recorded in the heaven chapter of the 16-character yin-yang Feng Shui secret art. It was the driest and most obscure chapter, and I had never applied it in practice. However, at this moment, I could only boast. I replied, "Professor, I'm not boasting, but this art of stellar compass and lunar carving is at my fingertips. However, where should I begin with this topic? To get this $, paid job, I poured out everything I knew, hoping to charm these people. Thanks to that family heirloom book at first, Hao Eguo saw me as young, and thought I was a relative of Wang, trying to use connections to get a meal. But after I spoke a few coherent sentences, he couldn't help but look at me differently, sitting on the side, listening attentively. This art of geomancy, known as the supreme study of earth science, can be simply summarized as the place where wind is hidden and water is obtained, land with wind receiving water. The Book of Burials states it very well. Burial is about preserving the vital energy. Energy disperses with wind and ceases upon encountering water. Ancient people gathered energy so it wouldn't scatter, and guided energy so it would stop. Thus, it is called Feng Shui. Later generations expanded the study of Feng Shui infinitely, not only confining it to the burial mounds and land veins, but gradually broadening it into the art of Kanyu. Kanyu, meaning heaven and earth, is frankly the study that analyzes the relationship between heaven, earth, and humans. But today I will only speak to the professor and the teachers present about the celestial geomancy branch of Feng Shui. Ancient emperors and nobles attached great importance to their afterlife. How they enjoyed life, so too must they possess in death. Moreover, they believed that the rise and fall of an empire originated from its dragon veins, so all imperial tombs had to be placed in auspicious Feng Shui locations. Emperor Yongzheng once thoroughly summarized imperial tombs, saying, "Where heaven and earth converge in beauty, where yin and yang gather, where the dragon's lair meets the treasured river, all beauty is captured. The aura is firm and sacred, 100 fortunes prosper. The mountain veins and watercourses are clear and distinct. That is a supremely auspicious land." Although these were just a few brief sentences, they truly described in the most direct, vivid, and metaphorical way the selection of land for imperial tombs. However, Yongzheng only spoke half of it. The realm of unity of heaven and man that the ancients pursued not only focused on watercourses and mountain veins, but also required observing the celestial stars, sun, and moon. Since ancient times, people have often regarded heaven as important, studying the changes of the stars to predict fortune and misfortune. When choosing auspicious Feng Shui land, they also applied the essence of astronomy. Heaven and earth are 84,000 li apart, the human heart and kidneys are 8 inches and 4 fen apart. The body is divided into metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, corresponding to the 5 celestial stellar origins. There are also 24 stars corresponding to the geography of mountains and rivers in the world. Stars have good and evil, and land has good and bad. Any supremely auspicious land will surely correspond with the celestial stars, sun, and moon. The Jingjue divination technique, which determines burial sites based on the movement of nebulae, is the most elusive branch of celestial geomancy. Heaven has 24 stars, a day has 24 hours, and a year has 24 solar terms, therefore Feng Shui also has 24 directions and 24 positions. By understanding the auspicious and inauspicious arrangements of these stars and using a compass for positioning, one can locate what we need to find. However, this celestial geomancy has many different schools and methods, with no small number of contradictions among them. Amidst the vast sea of sand, finding relics from 1,000 years ago, even a 2 or 3% chance, is already significant. Upon hearing this, Professor Chen joyfully stood up and said, "Mr. Yi speaks wonderfully. Heaven truly has eyes, and has finally sent a talent like you to us." In the Xinjiang desert, after 1,000 or even several thousand years, with all the upheavals, ancient oases and cities have now turned into a vast sea of sand. Rivers and mountain ranges have also disappeared without a trace. If we want to find tombs along the ancient Silk Road, the most direct and effective way is to rely on celestial geomancy. I declare that starting today, you two are officially joining our archaeological team. Hao Eiguo also came closer, shaking our hands warmly, apologizing for his earlier cold attitude. My apologies, my apologies. We intellectuals are all a bunch of pedants. After so many years of the Cultural Revolution, suffering greatly, we've become quite naive and don't know how to talk properly. I hope you two don't take it to heart. I secretly rejoiced. Hee, I only know so much. If I say more, I'll surely expose myself. Celestial geomancy is impossibly difficult, and I don't really understand it very well. But surely you bespectacled intellectuals won't be able to endure the harsh challenges of the desert. You'll turn back after 2 or 3 days. Besides, I exaggerated and minimized the probability of finding relics. If they don't find anything, they can't blame me for not knowing celestial geomancy, and my pay will still be exactly the same. As I was thinking to myself triumphantly, a young woman walked in. Professor Chen quickly introduced her to us. This is Miss Yang, the financial sponsor for our trip this time. She will also be joining us. Gentlemen, don't be mistaken just because Miss Yang is a woman. She is a photographer for the famous National Geographic magazine. I immediately put on a refined demeanor, shaking her hand respectfully. I thought since she was American, I should speak English to her. But how do you say hello? It seemed to be, hello. Miss Yang smiled. Mr. Yi, I also speak Chinese. Let's just converse in Chinese. From now on, you can call me Shirley Yang. I didn't expect her Mandarin to be so good. There wasn't a trace of an American accent. In fact, I didn't even know what an American accent sounded like anyway. I just felt she was no different from a Chinese person. Shirley Yang shook Quan Fatso's hand, then raised a question. Mr. Wang Kaikwan, Quan Fatso, has come with Mr. Yi. Mr. Yi's abilities are formidable. He was once a military commander, and also knows celestial geomancy. But what skills does Mr. Quan possess? We haven't seen them yet. This desert expedition is extremely important, and we don't need anyone without special abilities. I didn't expect the American to be so direct. Everyone looked towards Quan Fatso, and I quickly interjected, the desert isn't very safe. This friend of mine is a skilled marksman. Quan Fatso, seeing the American girl look down on him, pouted and angrily said, "What's wrong with Xinjiang?" Back then, this Quan Fatso came to the Xinjiang desert and swept away bandits, driving the local bandits in the Nia oasis to scatter their feces and urine, and even personally killed their leader. Look everyone, this is my trophy. With that, he took out the jade pendant he wore and brandished it in front of everyone. Have you ever seen this before? Standing next to him, I secretly smirked, thinking this idiot didn't even know how to properly fabricate a story. He was even claiming his old man's heroic tales as his own. Sweeping away bandits in Xinjiang? What nonsense. Back then, he was still wearing open crotch pants. Saying he had eaten Xinjiang roasted lamb would be more believable. At this point, I could only play along. If Quan Fatso didn't go, I wouldn't go either, so they would probably have to compromise in the end. Yet, no one refuted a word. Professor Chen's and Shirley Yang's eyes were both drawn to the jade piece in Quan Fatso's hand. Wherever his hand moved, everyone's gaze followed, not even blinking once. Shirley Yang had initially not agreed to let Quan Fatso join the archaeological team, but after seeing his jade pendant, she unhesitatingly agreed to pay each of us $10,000. If the ancient city of Jingjue deep in the desert was found, she would pay double that amount. However, this money would only be paid after we returned from Xinjiang. Wang had also seen Quan Fatso's jade pendant. As shrewd as he was, he couldn't discern the origin of this jade piece. In this regard, he was not as discerning as people like Professor Chen. After all, Wang only sold trinkets, while Professor Chen had immersed himself in the study of ancient Western regions culture for decades. Shirley Yang's father was a close friend of his, and she had been nurtured by her family background since childhood, so she could be considered a semi-expert on the history of the Western regions. Therefore, the two of them immediately recognized its origin upon seeing the jade piece. Professor Chen believed this jade piece had at least 1,500 to 2,000 years of history, and the characters engraved on it were Ghost Cave script. The Ghost Cave people were an ancient ethnic minority in the Western regions. This ethnic group had long since perished. Records excavated from ancient texts in Dunhuang state that the queen of the Jingjue kingdom was from the Ghost Cave tribe. The meaning of the 10 Ghost Cave characters on this jade piece still needed further verification to be known. Professor Chen and Shirley Yang's father were both enthusiasts of Western regions culture. Jingjue, a city that was once resplendently prosperous, could be said to be among the top 1 or 2 of the 36 kingdoms of the Western regions. During its peak, few cities in the entire Western regions could compare. Afterward, it seemed a great disaster occurred. The queen died, and then the entire city disappeared. The glory of the past is now buried by golden sands. The clues proving its existence are only fragmented records in ancient texts. Legend has it that the queen of Jingjue was the most beautiful woman in the Western regions. She was like the sun in the sky, and whenever she appeared, the moon and stars would dim and hide. Shirley Yang's father, precisely because he was searching for the tomb of this queen, organized an expedition team of 5 Chinese American scholars, equipped with the most advanced gear, and ventured deep into the sea of sand, never to return. This trip, first, was to conduct a survey and assess the current state of ancient tombs in the desert, and second, to try their luck to see if they could recover the remains of the 5 explorers, so they could be properly buried. Shirley Yang wanted to buy Quan Fatso's jade piece. He and I realized this was a valuable item to keep, so we gritted our teeth and refused to sell, secretly calculating how many dollars we could fleece her for. We joined the expedition team consisting of scholars and photographers. I became the team leader, and Quan Fatso became the deputy leader. The desert journey was thus decided. The train sped across the vast western lands. Quan Fatso and I slept in the sleeper car, completely oblivious to time. The first stop was Xi'an, where we would meet Professor Chen's 3 students. Then we would proceed to Urumqi, where the expedition's equipment would be transported directly. Guo entered, and was almost knocked over by the stench of Quan Fatso's feet. He shook me awake. "Comrade Yi, wake up, wake up. The professor wants to discuss something with you. Come over for a moment." I glanced out the window. It was still bright outside, though I didn't know the time, having slept soundly. I put on my coat and followed Guo to the next room. Professor Chen said, "Early tomorrow morning, we will arrive in Xi'an to pick up 3 of my students. Then the team members will be complete. You are the team leader, so I want to discuss some root issues with you beforehand." Shirley Yang, sitting next to him, also said, "That's right, Mr. Yi, the professor and I have discussed it. We plan to depart from Boston Lake, head south to find the Peacock River, then cross this river and venture deep into the desert. After that, we'll follow the Shudu underground river south to find the ancient city of Jingjue. We'd like to ask for your opinion on this. I found it quite amusing. These intellectuals and rich people, they only fight battles on paper, thinking far. Fetch thoughts. Going this way would be like making a Z shape through the desert. Who would ever dare to travel in a Z shape in the desert? Even if they don't die of hunger, thirst, or heat, they'll eventually die of exhaustion. However, I always thought these people were the type who were full and idle, making a fuss over nothing, not liking a peaceful and happy life, stubbornly insisting on suffering in the desert. Surely they'd cry and demand to go back after 2 or 3 days, so the itinerary didn't matter. As long as I got paid upon returning, that was fine. I told Shirley Yang, Miss Yang, although I am the guide, I don't have the authority to decide the itinerary. You all just determine the route and objectives, and I'll be responsible for getting everyone there. In other words, you are the managers and we are the coolies. As soon as I spoke, I felt a slight regret. There's an old saying, take a person's money and help them through their troubles. Since they were paying me, I naturally had to fulfill my duty. So I continued to tell them that the itinerary issue would have to wait until we reached Xinjiang, where we would consult a local guide before making a decision. It was still too early to say anything now, and I would take care of finding that guide. Everyone discussed a few more details, and then everyone went to rest. After this conversation on the train, I vaguely felt that these people were very determined and might not demand to go back after just a few days in the desert, as I had initially thought. In Xi'an, we met the remaining members of the archaeological team, all students of Professor Chen, the simple and honest Sa Dipeng, the tall Shi Jian, and Yi Yixun, who was a woman. Adding to the initial 5 people, there were a total of 9. Upon arriving in Xinjiang, I contacted Liu Gang, a former comrade. He was a descendant of the Xinjiang 359th Brigade, born and raised in Xinjiang, but not very familiar with the locals. Finding a local guide familiar with the desert terrain was not easy, so eventually, through Liu Gang's friends, we found an old man who traded livestock. Now no one called this old man by his real name, everyone called him Anlaman, meaning a living map of the desert. Old Anlaman held his pipe, shaking his head repeatedly. No can do, no can do. Now, it's the season of wind and sand. Entering the desert, old man Hutai, heaven, will bring down calamity. We had no choice but to use a carrot and stick approach. I told Professor Chen to take out the documents and explain to him that we were state cadres sent for work, and local comrades had to cooperate. If he didn't guide us, we would call the police, confiscate all his camels and donkeys, and prevent him from trading anymore. Shirley Yang added that as long as he agreed to guide them, she would buy all his livestock at double the price. After returning from the desert, the livestock would still be his, and the money would also be his. Old Anlaman had no other choice but to agree, but he made a request. Don't drive cars. Hutai doesn't like machines. Camels, you must bring many. Hutai likes camels. On this point, I agreed with Anlaman. In the desert, camels were much more reliable than cars. Mr. Anlaman selected 20 camels. On the day of departure, everyone's luggage and equipment were loaded onto their backs. In addition, a large quantity of bean cakes and salt was carried. As Quan Fatso helped him move the items, he asked, "Sir, in the desert, do we only eat bean cakes and salt? Wouldn't that make us even thirstier?" Mr. Anlaman laughed loudly. "Aya Mayu Lianzhang, strong young man, you can eat these if you want, but Hutai says these things are for the camels to eat." Mr. Anlaman told everyone that this season was the most dangerous time in the desert. The first route from Boston Lake to the ruins of Xie City involved both desert and wasteland. Fortunately, the ancient Peacock River connected them, so it wasn't difficult to recognize. But wanting to go deeper, whether they would find the Shudu underground river or not, still depended on Hutai's will. Our team of 9, called an archaeological team, might as well be called a camel team. The food we brought would certainly not be enough for 1 month, and the clean water would only last for over 10 days. We could replenish fresh water at oases and underground rivers along the way. In addition, there were several large leather bags filled with yogurt. Whenever thirst became unbearable, 1 mouthful of it was more refreshing than 10 mouthfuls of fresh water. Plus, all the equipment meant each camel had to carry a very heavy load. When setting off, everyone could only rely on their feet, walking half the way and riding camels for the other half.